like I was saying, I work for Sulke Engineering. However, this presentation is based on a piece of work that I did to help USP UK, a charity that is helping Ukrainians relocate to the UK, and and in helping them build their website, I kind of like learned a few interesting things that I thought comparing to, again, to the kind of work that I do if I were to develop an application using libraries such as ReactJS. So see, yeah, that's a bit about me. I'm a software engineer. I like the topic of DevOps, and as such, I work a lot on automation, build engineering, running applications in the cloud, and helping our clients here at Sulke be able to do that. I also develop applications, and I like all things cloud as well. So it's the kind of like technical things that I like and enjoy doing here at Sulke. Other than that, I certified myself not too long ago as a mental health first aider. I love coffee, kind of like coffee snob sometimes. So much that I like it so much that I have had the pleasure to be able to visit coffee farms in Panama and other countries. I'm into photography. This photography here is actually taken in film. If you are into that, this is a Kodak Portra 800. This is with some colleagues here from Sulke. And I love traveling and combining the coffee and the photography during traveling. So yeah, this talk is about those technical things that I learned during the process of building USB.org. Patterns, as I've seen, things that I felt repeated often, and they can be somehow compared to when developing in React.js. So yeah, I'll talk to you about that comparison. I think I attempted to kind of like describe here for you maybe why you should care at all to listen to this thing. Perhaps you're learning, and you're particularly learning about building websites in Webflow. So hopefully the things that I'll show today will give you tools and things to be more effective and save some time. Maybe you're into developing websites, and if you develop websites, why not? I guess as a software developer or engineer, one of the things you should probably do is to consider using different tools to solve the problem at hand. So I hope that these slides give you a different point of view in that regards. And particularly in the Webflow part, building proof of concepts is a good thing. Webflow can enable you to do that fairly quickly. We won't cover things like methodology or design, like as in designing the website and the colors and any of that. And we won't talk about deeper things in the aspect of programming and architecture. So it's meant to be a lightweight thing. What I noticed, what I learned, and what I think, how the two things compare. Some definitions just in case, because I don't know who's in the room, and what's your background knowledge and all that. Webflow is a tool that is a website. You can go into it, create an account, and then start creating your websites. It's a visual interface that allows you to build websites. You can basically drag and drop HTML elements and start composing your website, and then you can apply styling to the elements to make it look nice and pretty. React.js is a JavaScript library to build user interfaces. either there programmatically, because you have to code quite a lot to get your apps up and running. So let's get started. I'm going to go first through a set of things. These initial patterns, they may not make, like, the screenshots may not make full sense if you haven't seen Webflow at all. But don't worry, we'll make a stop, do a bit of a demo, and this should help you kind of like put all the things together. For now, just imagine that you're building a website and you have the need to integrate third-party software that is meant to help you achieve something or do something. A typical example is Google Analytics, that you may want to have it running in your website for you to fetch all those analytics from the analytics dashboard. And well, Webflow allows you to do that in this sort of custom code section of the Webflow console, web console. And here's where you can add these things. So it's very handy because you can have it all in one place and see all of the third-party code that you're using. However, one of the typical things, like if you were to do this in React, you probably all put it on a component or on a place where it is, the whole responsibility of that function or class is to pass what you want to put in your header back to your full application, and in there in React you could potentially use configuration and have variables that are injected from the outside world into your React app and then passed through your code, injected into where they need to go. Here, not everything has to be hard coded. Everything has to be copy pasted on this part. So yeah, which makes it kind of like harder if you just want to split out development from developers who have a responsibility of building the website and keep things that are secure to a minimum amount of people. So least privilege concept there. So yeah, this is a nice thing to be able to put them on here. One of the things is there's no configuration management. Embedded code, they are great because you can take, again, external resources that allow you to embed code in the website. And this is just another way of bringing third-party code. So do consider them using them. And yeah, there is not much here to say or to compare to a React application. If you were in the same need, you probably have to do the same thing and embed it here and so on. Again, embedded code in Webflow, if you needed it, there's no configuration management. Specifics of the styling need to go in there. So it's not that you can have your CSS styles stored in a file and make a reference to them on your code here. So you're given this sort of a code editor view to add all of that. Let's look at an example of merging both the embedded code snippets and working with the custom code for your header. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to start from the right-hand side because that's what you saw first. There is this menu at the bottom of our page that can help you change the language of the website. So you may be able to see it in Ukrainian or in English. And that's possible because we are using Wiglot, a translation service that then we inject into our application through the custom headers. On the other hand, on the left hand side, we have an embedded Google form that in this case, the user selected to see the website in Ukrainian. Therefore, you can see everything in Ukrainian there in the form. However, the device is in German. So there's no easy way, or at least I haven't learned if there is such way. But for what I've seen, there's no easy way to actually connect the two things. You probably need to find a way to do it kind of like programmatically, because the script for Wiglo sits at the header section, and the embedded stuff sits within your application. There's no way to communicate and say, well, listen, if this button has been pressed, I want the Google form to display the language in this, for example, in Ukrainian. These are things that you can do way more easily if you're building a React application, because you're in control of everything basically. So you can connect those things. In React, we talk a lot about components. In Webflow, there is a similar thing. They call them symbols. And I think if you are disciplined enough, you can create enough symbols to be able to reuse across your application. And when I say discipline, is because they require like concentration. They require you to be like a bit precise, organized. I think define styles that are unique for the things that are you putting in your symbols, so that if you edit that style later on, you don't mess up your entire symbols. Yeah, you need to spend. They require actually quite a lot of time to set up. At least in my experience, they did, because when you're changing things, you need to look how they look on full screen and in all the other resolutions for tablet and mobile devices. And yeah, can be tricky to achieve the behavior that you want to see with the correct styling and everything. But they're great because if you do them once, then you can reuse them all over the place. So when you create pages, you can just insert your in this case, navigation bar symbol all over the place. I like this because it compares a lot to React, where you can just create components and keep reusing them. So in that sense, I think they're sort of similar. There is another thing in Webflow called collection lists. They sort of allow you to replicate components multiple times. So we're going to see an example in a minute, but for now, let's just imagine that our designer has come up with a concept of putting together some images, some text, perhaps a title that give more sense to the text that we're seeing, and an action button. So those 4 components are here, and if you put them together, you probably see them like this. So at this point, what I'm trying to say is you could start seeing things like this as a whole component that is composed of a few specific unique elements, an image element, text element, another text element, and a button element. And you can split that out, build your one component, and then make it repeated through collection. Make it repeat on your website through collection lists, making it look something like this. So you build one once, and then based on the data that you have available in Webflow has an equivalent of databases, which you can connect to your collection lists, and that's how then your collections list would do the magic of components of repeating all the component all across. So I don't want to bore you too much with slides. Let's try to make it a bit more dynamic and show you some of the things that we cover so far. I'm going to exit the presentation mode. I'm going to come here to my Google Chrome. I think you should be able to see this still. So I'm sharing the entire screen. So I'm going to make this larger. I have a pretty large screen. let's go into the designer view of the website. So let's see, let's start with here, since we're inside the designer view, we won't be able to see the headers part, but we can look at the form being there, being enabled. You add forms through this sort of panel that allows you to drag and drop the elements that you need. And in that case, there is the embedded view here. So we just drag and drop that thing and then just style it a bit. We have our symbols here. I also covered the topic of the symbols. So as you can see, here's our header. It's our navigation bar symbol. I tried to add a bit of a naming conventions, which is also a big thing, like when you're actually developing. So hopefully that should help. I guess if you had a larger team doing things in Webflow, that should really help with how things should be named. We also have a footer, a symbol here that repeats in all our pages. So if I go back page to our home page, this is essentially the same thing. Navigation symbol at the top, footer symbol at the bottom. We talked about the collection list and how there are items that are repeating. I briefly mentioned that there is the concept of a CMS. So it's like a database. Here's our collection list thing. If I drill down into how, that's not what I wanted to do. That is what I wanted to do. If we look at a one collection item, it's essentially a container with an image, with some text, with some extra text, and a button. That's it. You then wire that up together with your database, and then they repeat. Right. Let's go back to the presentation just to keep showing you some of the other things that we did. Presentation mode. So collections. They're like databases. You cannot actually do this in these kind of things in React. Over there, I suppose you're just making sure that on one end you are building your components the one you want them to be to behave and to look like, and reuse them as you need. You can do for loops and iterate over a list of elements and display more HTML code based on on arrays and things and expressions that you need to have into account in order to display all your content, right? Here you need to rely a lot on databases because they help you automate and make things more dynamic. So in this particular case, the three images that you saw, the three widgets that you saw, is these three entries in this database, which is information for the widget collection. I just name it like that. For CMS, you can define your data model, kind of like in quotes, because they are essentially just fields, and they're the fields that you need to be able to compose your UI. In this case, the fields are an image, some header, and again the text that goes in the button, because the button you can style separately. What you really need is the thing that will be different, which is the text on that displayed on the button, and the link used to for the button to take action. And you have access to control the data, and the data, for example, if you look at the right hand side image, you have the list with the three dots over there, bullet points, I mean, and you can even format this in very lightweight HTML code. So you can have lists, you can have paragraphs, you can have headers, you can have links. As you can see, the last bit says UK government highlighted in blue. It's a bit more contrasty. So yeah, that's a link. So you have this degree of flexibility to come and define your data and also kind of like format it. So these are the collections lists. This is how they are when you drop an element of a collection list. They initially look like this. They kind of like prepared to repeat the same collection, the item that you've defined. You need to connect them to a database, and after you do so, that's when magic starts happening. When you are composing your or you're building the elements that will make up a whole collection list item, you can then choose which item should be linked to the fields in your data model of your database. So in this case, we want the header text to be linked to the widget header field in the database. As you can see, the names change. So at the top we have header 3 text, which is one of the tricky things about naming in I guess in general, but in Webflow in particular, what you're seeing there is the name of the style applied to that text over there, turning it into a header 3 type of text. What you see at the bottom, the widget header is just how we name the field. So it can become messy, and we're going to see that later. Again, how the component looks like. Talking about styles, they are painful actually, and they are particularly painful in Webflow because this is how I'm going to show you in a minute. But every time you edit something, you create a style basically, and this is how they start listing it. So you don't have much control until, if you don't realize, you won't be able to control what Webflow is doing on your behalf. Therefore, you have to be also like very disciplined in naming your styles.
Raul, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Are you able to see the chat?
I'm not able to see the chat. No.
Raised the question. He said, how do we manipulate data that we collect? For example, if we wanted to bring out a list of people of a certain age.
Okay, we can do that. And I'm going to show you with an example in a second. Just gonna go through this, and I'll show you in the next moment of the demo, which is coming soon. So the danger of this mess happening here. Why am I saying that this is a mess? So look at the image on the left-hand side. How the classes are named: div, block, section, button, capital letter. These are things that are named automatically by Webflow. Look at the image on the right-hand side at the bottom. The last three styles are styles that I created and I named that way. If somebody else, another member of the team comes along, starts making some change, and let's say, for example, one of the automatically created styles by Webflow was added on that element, and they start changing the style. They're effectively changing the style for everywhere where that is applied. And that can be tricky because if you're not like paying attention, you are potentially messing up the entire website or elements across the entire website. Here's an example. These buttons, they had a different styling applied to them, so the app button was applied to them initially. Somebody made some changes. They got dragged all the way to the right, However, they should be contained within the div block 16 that is on the left-hand side. So in order to fix this, you first need to create a copy so that you maintain the original stuff, fix the fact that the margin was pushed the elements outside the div, and then go and inspect the original app button and see what the styling should be for it, and maybe if that should be the name of the style at all. So let's go back to the demo. So first, I'd like to cover the question. Let me just try to give you an example, a real example of something that I'm working on testing things. So currently our FAQs, they're sort of hard-coded on the page, and I'm trying to turn them into trying to use the power of the collection list and the way they replicate. So I think what I'm hearing in your question, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is essentially how you bring the data in, and later on when you're visualizing that data, how you kind of like filter. There's excellent documentation by Webflow on how to filter. However, here's an example. My collection came through here's FAQs. I created this. This can be a CSV file that you can upload and you can manipulate yourself. And then you can push. But then comes the part where you say, okay, how am I going to display that with some filtering, some filtering options. Every category I assigned a different ID, because I want the categories to be uniquely named and nothing else can mess up with them. And I want them to be uniquely identified, and that none of the two things are, getting in the way of each other. And therefore I can apply logic on the category ID and not a logic on the name of the category, because that's something that you show to the user. So the ingestion part is, here I'm not covering like automated ingestion, like user input or anything like that. I haven't done that. I wouldn't be able to tell you on top of my head how you get user input into a collection. It's probably a way. Again, I would suggest you check out the documentation for that. However, let's say that is coming the other way around, and you are building up this database with data that you already know. You can import that through your CSV, and then if we go back to the page, to the filtering aspect, I think I will have to move this a little bit. And find the collection. Here's that collection. So as you can see here, my collection ID, my collection is composed of titles and text that is coming from the database. And I'm only showing 1, 2, 3 titles. That means 3 records. And that's because I've made my collection list to only show those items whose category ID matches 100. And that's how you kind of like have to connect these things. When you're doing this in React, you completely do it in another way. You actually bring like full JavaScript objects in there. You apply your logic on your component as you're rendering, maybe, or if this is an actual component that is meant to display, let's say, only three items, you then pass the necessary information to your component so that it can render these only 3 items. So yes, it's a whole different kind of like whole different approach. The practices that work for React in these regards, you can't apply here. So it requires a bit of a shift of a mindset for me, to not kind of like start thinking about this. It's actually gonna take me to probably the last point that I have to talk to you about. Actually, before I forget, the styling. Here's the styling happening one more time. Up header 3 text. That's all here, but look at how the list has grown on the right-hand side. The list is huge. And it's because it's really hard to manage. We're on this website, we're like maybe 3 people collaborating on the website. So, and yeah, it's not straightforward to know exactly how we want to name things and what logics should be followed and all that, because of the nature of how styling behaves in this system. Right. So for the last bit, I guess if I could choose for things that I miss in Webflow versus things that I love in when working in projects in React, developing applications in ReactJS, is change control. Sometimes we would change things and it would be hard to know what changed and where. So that'll be great. Tagging changes would be amazing as well. Maybe to be able to release specific changes and to let's say stack or queue a bunch of changes, and when we're ready, be able to release them. I didn't add that here, but now I'm thinking one thing that I try to do is the concept of having different environments and having different websites running separately. Like if I was doing this in React, I would deploy my code, let's say, for example, in an AWS account, and create 3 separate environments, maybe one for the development, one for testing, that things are good to go to production, and then the production environment. Like here is impossible to do that. Even if you create 3 different projects, getting the design work that you've done in one project, getting into the other projects is very difficult, cumbersome, almost impossible, because you cannot always copy paste all the styling. So yeah, and then versioning would be a nice thing to have as well, but versioning in the sense that you can control.
We've had a couple more questions online in the
Yes,
chat.
please. Thank you.
Do we need to do anything extra when we collect customer data in order to fulfill GDPR rules and such? Or does Webflow store and comply with the rules?
You need to do so. For example, we're doing it ourselves. It's a good question. We're doing it ourselves, and our way to collect data is through the form, through the Google form. In this case, again, I haven't done data collection like natively inside Webflow and maybe storing it in their CMS or in an instance of a CMS. But I think the 2 things go a bit detached. One thing is how you kind of like ingest that data, and another thing is just making sure that you've spoken to your your colleagues or that know about the legalities about GDPR and data protection, and what is the wording that you need to have and where, so that everything is covered.
And the supplementary question to that is, if Webflow is intended for push websites, is there encryption between the CMS and the components? I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
Yeah, me
no,
neither.
come on.
Encryption in the components. I don't understand that one. So they do make it secure for you. That's for sure. You can make it a secure website with HTTPS. They make that super easy for you. If you are, I guess, yeah, that's a good point. I didn't consider that for this talk. You know, all that boilerplate they do for you with your React application, whatever you deploy it, if you're doing a custom deployment like in an AWS account, you need to work out your own.
There's a lot of questions coming in via chat now. Could I suggest people actually raise their hand and unmute their microphone when it's their turn?
Yeah, let's have a chat. That would be great. If you can unmute yourself, let's talk. I think I can open the chat here as well. Yes. I guess I stopped sharing.
Suddenly we're all shy.
What would be the next question? Is it?
Yes, so there's the question about encryption between the backend and the user interface, I guess, and the web browser. You've covered that one.
Yeah,
so Tony says, coming back from your previous question, do you need to use an external server to store the data?
Yes, you need an external place where to store data. If you do it, for example, the Google Forms thing is that data is stored in the Google Form, in the spreadsheet that is linked to it. So I mean, that's how typically Google Form works, right? So in that sense, yes, you need to find an external way. But if you manage to find a way, again, I haven't done it, but if you do find a way to doing using Webflow elements and components and the CMS, then that data will live inside your Webflow account, and it will be uniquely available to you, and that's private. The actual CMS can't be seen by somebody else. The only reason you can see elements of like contents of my CMS in the website is because I have made it that way. I've designed the website to fetch the content from the CMS. I can see another one. Can a Webflow project be exported, imported to text to put into a version control system? And no, not the whole thing. At least, I mean, there might be another Webflow expert in the room, and I may be wrong, but there is. I remember seeing something about being able to have like a backup of your project, but I'm not sure whether that would be helpful in the sense that you're meaning here. It's not a bad idea. Could be one way. The thing is that code is not a code that you probably be able to. I can't see how that code is something that you probably be able to change, do it, kind of like more programmatically, and then import again. Is there a recording after? Like to review some of the things. I think this is being recorded. Yes.
We're recording this. There's a YouTube channel that the BCS maintains, and the BCS SPA has its own playlist, which you can find on our homepage. It usually takes a day or two before the web team have had a chance to edit the recording.
Yeah, thank you. You meant tampering with field text. So if I try to put your question together for the audience that is listening to us, if Webflow is intended for push websites, is there?
I think what Noah's asking is, if you're putting things into a web form and they're going to the Webflow backend, is there any chance that that information could be tampered with en route? I think the point is that it's all going over HTTPS, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's going over HTTPS. That's a good point. I see how it's being tampered with. Yeah. Can Webflow be used to create accessible websites? Yes. Up until that point, IG reflow content with client user selected font size, or are the styles locked in at the design stage? Oh, I see what you mean. Giving the flexibility to the user to choose. I think that would be hard to give the user the flexibility to choose, like a configure their, they want the UI to look like for that particular website.
Just you try it out, because there's
Yeah.
the UK USP website that you've shown us. You could just try putting it up in the browser and trying to up and down the font size and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we tried our best to do accessible and responsive. So from designing from choosing the colors and all that to the logo and all of that. So we picked up on a lot of elements that are related to accessibility. If your question is on the side of, can I let the user choose? We haven't done that. I don't think that's feasible, because you would need somehow to tell Webflow to behave itself in a different way on how the page is seen. So I don't think you can dynamically change the font size. What's Webflow's implementation lang? Good question. I don't know. I haven't checked blog posts from their technical team or anything like that to understand. I know you can write custom code, but I haven't done myself. I haven't had the need to do that. So yeah, I don't know. There is a whole thing actually going on Webflow where you can buy components and import them into your projects. So I'm guessing those people who are building those components are probably using maybe web components or React projects or something like that. Does Webflow have a inbuilt features to prevent hacking or attacks on the site? I suggest you read on that if you were to create an account with one of their offerings. So when we set up our account, we chose one of the offerings available from them, and they do express, I don't remember right now, but they do say what's included in terms of security. So I believe I recall seeing that they do have DDoS, they cover for DDoS attacks. Is there not a component responsible to handle the CSS configuration problem? Yeah, no, I didn't find one. If you do, let me know. Is it necessary to sync any components in Webflow to achieve compliance? To sign. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean by signing components to achieve compliance. Also, what kind of compliance do you mean? Because when I talk about creating components in Webflow, so symbols or collection lists, I'm just making a parallel of the broader sense of creating a component. So, you know, there isn't such thing as your component being signed. So if you ask in the example of GDPR, so no, I mean, one thing I think you need to think in the following. Your components is how you're laying out your code, your design, your implementation. There's the design aspect, so the cosmetical aspect of things. Then you can apply to your components through CSS and the CSS styles, the way it's done in particularly in Webflow. And then what the components do on how the components behave and how they tied into legal things like GDPR, that's a whole separate thing. And yeah, to sort that out, you need to discuss it with your development team. How do you see the future of ReactJS in coming years versus Webflow? I mean, they're two separate things. Webflow, I don't think Webflow will take over ReactJS. ReactJS is mostly for developers, and Webflow is for technical people who know how to code, because they've done this before and they can come back in here and do it and figure out how to do it. But it gives more control to the people who don't want just to drag and drop things easily or simply, like maybe like in Wix or Square. Webflow gives you more control. And that's why I'm comparing Webflow to React, because it's of what is out there is the one that I think gave us the most amount of flexibility to be able to do things. For example, the bringing in Wiglot to be able to do the translation and how it works and how you integrate it. It felt easy and straight away, and how you can create these symbols and collection lists. And the database, the CMS, one of the other advantages of the CMS is that in the team, we can have somebody who only goes and logs into the CMS, so into the designer view, access the CMS, exports the CSV of the data, makes the changes that they need to do, and then import it again. And that export, for example, somebody was asking about the exports of the entire project, but you can do this with your CMS. You could be exporting that and have that version control. It's very nice. So in summary, Fireball is a low-code, robust way to put sites quickly. Yes, that's right. It's, I think, but not fancy. I think it's fancy in its own way. It's fancier than Wix and Square, that's for sure. But I believe in code, so I'm a React.js guy, if you ask me. So yeah, thank you guys. Wow, interesting questions. Like I didn't expect some of them. Thanks a lot.
So yes, it's been interesting. I don't know if you've got any specific examples of React being used that you can contrast with this presentation. You've seen quite a lot of Webflow now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I purposely did that for two reasons. The amount of time that I had available to prepare the presentation, and second, because I thought I would just talk you through React. I know, yeah, I guess it would have been nice, but I thought that the audience would probably be somewhat familiar, maybe not at deep level in terms of coding. Not everybody has to have had that experience, but maybe at least have heard about it. So I thought of bringing in more examples of Webflow.
Yeah, I've used React a little bit myself, and essentially it's you write an HTML template, but very soon you're diving off into JavaScript to do all of the actual work to populate that template with data.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of approach. It's more of an engineering approach, I think, whereas this is much more of a composition approach.
Yeah, definitely. I found Webflow to be more, you have to switch your mindset a bit and move away from classic or traditional engineering approaches, which I missed. I missed the, doing one change and only one change, and committing that and pushing that and seeing that going live and automated CI/CD, I don't know, things like that.
And of course,
being able to revert.
In the Cypress order.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. There's no testing here. You have to do the testing yourself. You have to, you can do one change. You can do the concept of one change and commit and push is one change and publish. And then you go on your browser and you test it. and then you ask your friends, hey, can you see this thing changing?
Ah, okay. And there's no way of kind of exposing that new version to just a fraction of the number of users and that kind of thing?
No.
Okay. So
No.
you'd basically you'd need to have some kind of a test site where you can try things out and then promote. But there again, you'd need to be able to export and import, wouldn't you? So that's
Exactly, and that I tried to do, but that was super hard to achieve, to have a test site. So yeah, I see another question. If I was going to hire a ReactJS developer, are there any particular advice or questions you have that can help me pick up the right person? This is a classic question that I will answer with, it depends. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the seniority level that you want the developer to have, the type of experience, even the type of, like, the context or the domain in which you want to create, in the domain in which you want to solve a problem using ReactJS. But I mean, just to try to answer a bit the question, you can access the ReactJS website and fetch the documentation where they explain, like, components, and yeah, I don't know, the ins and outs of how React works. That's the answers are there, and you can use them to contrast. The problem of that is that my advice would be find somebody who is seasoned into web development, software engineering, and that has worked in ReactJS to help you drive those technical questions, because you can go there and use that as a guidance. But if you measure people by answering the correct answer by what's written on the documentation, you might miss on a whole bunch of other things. Or they may assert the answer just like it's in the documentation, but that's not a guarantee that you're picking the right person.
Well, my guess would be is that you'd probably want to ask them to explain how you layer the application, how you decompose it into domains, and whether they come up with anything coherent. Because if they've only been following examples of Stack Overflow, they probably wouldn't be able to explain that very well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, of course, I'm just reading the question, so I don't know your background, the person that asked the question, so I don't know how technical you are or how closer to, I guess, the business, if we can put the two things. And so yeah, not knowing that, I wouldn't know if you'd be able to do what Imo suggests. But definitely, either if you can do it, great. If not, maybe, yeah, getting somebody that has had that experience to tell you. As a React dev, I was curious about Webflow, but you explained everything very well. Thank you very much. So what would you say is the key selling point of using Webflow? What are the best use cases? Well, proof of concepts for sure. If it's like simple, like you don't need dynamic things, like things like require you to, if you click here, then this thing is going to spin, and then you're going to get this data. Don't go for that. In that case, you may actually need just some wireframes to be able to build the proof of concept and for people to get an ideal visual. But through sketching and stuff like that, and then you see where to take it with the development team. But nice use cases for Webflow are simple e-commerce websites, informative websites, just like what USP UK is doing. You can then integrate with a lot of things. There's, like, for example, we wanted to integrate the website with Instagram, and you can use external services such as Zapier, ZAPPIER, I think it is. So it give you these other flexibilities. You can bring in code from outside to solve the particular things that you need. So yeah, I mean, Webflow themselves have a bunch of use cases in their website, so you can get a feel for that.
You mentioned Wix, sort of by the by, as a comparison. I found I've worked on several Wix websites now, and it is relatively intuitive to use. I think the one thing you have to get used to a bit is this sort of idea of containers, and strips. Lost my train of thought. Yes, what I wanted to say was Wix provides you with a huge palette of template websites that you can choose a style of a website, and it'll basically knock that together for you, and then you can come and customize. Is there any equivalent concept in Webflow? Or did you start totally from scratch when you designed this website?
Yeah, I started from scratch with this website. Yeah. I didn't have something to import or start from. I mean, actually, sorry. When to be more precise, when I landed in the project, there was something. But yeah, it all started from scratch. I can see another question. So architecturally, is Webflow a microservices app? I think they're not comparable. They are not comparable, yeah. I mean, Webflow is just an app, just like if you were to do a single page application and host it statically in AWS, for example. So what you get in the end is just that.
I think the question addresses your earlier point that you can make use of external services. Are they integrated at the back end or in the user interface?
Oh, good clarification. They are integrated at the user interface. So you're essentially bringing JavaScript from a third party to execute on your app when it loads.
Okay, I think we seem to have coasted gently to a halt there. I really appreciate your jumping in at the last minute to hold this talk, Roel. And
thank you.
I saw a slightly shorter and earlier version of it last week, which I thought was brilliant. Yeah, so thank you again. As I say, we will be having a meeting after the conference in early July, first Wednesday of every month. And I will try and find you another exciting and interesting speaker for that. If you're interested in Choreo and Ballerina, do have a look at WSO2's website. There's a number of short videos that show you what it can do. And
yeah, thank you all. If people want to get in touch, you can find me on LinkedIn, Raul Rodriguez. I work for Zulke. Zulke is ZUHLKE. That should be enough keywords for you to find me.